Amazing. I think we are all good to go. On to the next slide, please. So, as we begin,
Asma, can I
yes,
just speak in French for the people who are here today listening in French?
yes,
If that's
please,
okay?
yes.
Donc, salut tout le monde, j'espère que vous allez bien. Mon nom c'est Ken, je suis le responsable des communications pour la Coalition pour une saine alimentation scolaire. Donc, juste petit rappel, donc si vous voulez écouter la séance d'information en français, donc juste au bas de votre écran sur Zoom, vous pouvez écrire, juste peser le bouton d'interprétation pour écouter la séance en français. Donc, nous avons nos deux interprètes qui sont sur place pour faire la traduction. Donc, si jamais vous voulez juste écouter la séance en français, n'hésitez pas. Et si vous avez des soucis, envoyez un message et on pourra vous aider. Donc, je vais repasser la parole à Asma. Asma, back to you.
I was muted. And now I will, as we begin, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land we're on. For those of you who are joining us from Toronto, we acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is also home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis populations, and we intend to honor that here today. As we talk about school food, food justice, we remain grounded in the knowledge that food sovereignty must always be rooted in Indigenous land sovereignty. And we are committed to working in solidarity with Indigenous communities in pursuit of just sustainable food systems. Fantastic. And so, who are we? So who is the Black School Food Working Group? We are the Black School Food Working Group, or BSFWG for short. And we are 20 members strong. We started last year in July, I believe. And our work is grounded in articulating the experiences, interests, and policy recommendations of the Black school food movement across Canada. And here's a bit of what we do. So we work to ensure that advocacy efforts at all levels, including federal, provincial, and territorial and municipal, include and reflect Black voices and Black food sovereignty principles. We share and uplift the best practices from Black-led school food models within the broader school food movement. And finally, we advocate to strengthen the presence and leadership of Black school food sovereignty initiatives within the Coalition for Healthy School Foods. And one thing that came to mind, so I do think that's on the next slide, I want to say. One thing that did come to mind specifically is a lot of people might be wondering why a Black-led information session. We also want to take a moment to acknowledge today's session is for Black-led organizations, but we also welcome everyone who has joined us here today, and we're really glad that you are here. This session is specifically being held for two key reasons. Firstly, that Black-led organizations have historically been excluded from access to grant opportunities and essential information about school food funding and programming. And this session has also been hosted at the request of the members of the Black School Food Working Group, who asked for a dedicated space to access this information and ask questions that reflect the unique realities and needs of the Black communities. And we believe in centering those who are being pushed to the margins and making space for meaningful engagement that leads to equity and not just inclusion. Perfect. And take it away, Carolyn.
Thanks, Asma. My name is Carolyn Webb. I am Program Director with Farm to Cafeteria Canada, one of the 10 organizations distributing school food infrastructure funding. And I am just going to give an overview on behalf of the broader fund on behalf of all the funders, but kind of just representing, to just give some of the basic info. And I'll also invite some of the other funding organizations to fill in any gaps if I miss some. So thanks so much, Asma, and thanks to everyone for this opportunity. I am joining today from Ottawa on the traditional lands of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, and yeah, just grateful to be here. So the School Food Infrastructure Funding Fund was announced in September 2022 by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in the amount of $20.2 million as a part of the broader Local Food Infrastructure Fund to be distributed over 2 years. 10 organizations or coalitions have been selected to distribute school food infrastructure funding. That was a process in October, November, December. And so we received a notification in December that these 10 organizations were going to be funding, providing grant opportunities and funding opportunities for other organizations. And so of these 10 organizations, some have priority focus areas, some have specific catchment areas or regions, and the different organizations' processes have some similarities and some differences, including some different application dates and some other nuances. So each must run a fair and transparent selection process. And I will say that we've all been meeting every couple of weeks to kind of make sure we're on the same page and also to see if we can make the process more simple for applicants. There is a chart that, Asma, I don't know if you have it available, but if you could put it in the chat, that could be welcome. That just we put together to try to make it easy to find links to all the different application processes and get more information. Thank you. Next slide. So the broad objectives and priorities of the fund are to support the purchase and installation of infrastructure and equipment. So every dollar needs to go towards that infrastructure and equipment that increases the capacity of community organizations to produce, process, store, and distribute food for school food programs, as well as to ultimately strengthen the wider community and local food systems and help ensure that children and youth have the nutritious meals they need to learn, grow, and reach their full potential. And they do have a definition of school food programs that we can all refer to think, okay, what exactly does that mean? And AFC has also specified that priority must be given to ultimate recipients who are serving schools attended by children and youth from lower income families, as well as visible minority and Indigenous communities. And so all 10 of the funding organizations will have that as a priority. Next slide, please. The specific project outcomes that are kind of laid out as a framework for project evaluation are that organizations have increased capacity to deliver school food programs, that food environments are improved within schools, and strengthened community food security. Next slide. And then all of the funding organizations will have the same organization eligibility for the entire fund. And so eligible organizations must be community-based organizations engaged with school food programs and not-for-profit organizations or charities. And so there are a number of entities that aren't eligible recipients, and these include municipal or school bodies, including local governments, health authorities, school boards or schools, government and quasi-governmental organizations, academic and educational institutions, and for-profit entities. And this does include schools, it does include First Nations bands, it does include, I'm trying to think of who else, other of the initial of the funders might have some other specifics for questions that we've been receiving about who is and who isn't eligible. If someone has an independent organization that is kind of at arm's length or kind of connected to, but not necessarily part of the school board, it can apply for funding. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thanks. And then eligible costs. So all of the funding organizations will have pretty much the same chart of what is eligible and ineligible. And so folks can access that chart. It does include some eligible costs are gardens, food forests, seeds, cooking equipment, loading dock, food storage racks. And so there's a long list of different things that are eligible, and ineligible costs include aquaponics equipment, livestock, food, storage of non-food items, and then a number of other items, but refundable taxes is there as an ineligible cost. And so if a not-for-profit does get GST or HST back, that amount that they would get back is not allowed to be funded by the funders. So in all cases, money must be spent by the end of March 2026. All the infrastructure and equipment bought must have a useful life for at least 2 years. And it must be used by the ultimate recipients, so the community organizations applying to support the delivery of school food programs. So it can't just be
Yeah, Karen, you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry, thanks. I will just say a few of the points that I might have not been heard for then. All infrastructure or equipment, needs to have a useful life of about 2 years. And it needs to be owned and used by the organizations that have applied for and received the funds. It can't be kind of put in a school and then just left for the school to use. It actually needs to be continually used and owned by the community organizations. I think that might be the last slide. Yeah, and so I don't know if this is a good time for other speakers to jump in and share any nuances that I might have missed, or if you'd prefer that later, Asma. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you first of all so much, Carolyn, for that brief introduction to the School Food Initiative Fund. Before we actually get into the main discussion, we'd like to take a moment to introduce some of our key organizations joining us today. So they are all initial recipients of the SFIF fund or grant, and we're grateful that we have several partners who are here playing important roles in the school food space. And I'll invite each speaker to briefly introduce themselves. So your name, your role, a bit about your organization and the work they do, anything that, additional perspective as a funder and focus of your grant. So I do believe that Lindsay, you are the first one on our chart there. I'll just share the.
Hi, everybody. My name's Lindsay Corbin. My pronouns are she, her, and I am with Nourish Nova Scotia. We're part of the Atlantic School Food Coalition. If you are looking on the School Food Infrastructure Fund website, you will see Food First Newfoundland listed as the initial recipient. And so Food First Newfoundland is administering the actual financial aspect, but there is a coalition of us from Atlantic Canada organizations. So Nourish Nova Scotia for Nova Scotia, Food for All New Brunswick, and the PEI Home and School Federation are the organizations. I'll speak a little bit about, so my role with Nourish Nova Scotia, one of my roles with Nourish Nova Scotia is to coordinate the chapter, the Coalition for Healthy School Food chapter in Nova Scotia. And so the advocacy, we've been doing advocacy work for a few years here specifically. And then I also am the co-lead for school food and have been working with the provincial government on really kind of shining a light on all the great work that has happened in school food in Nova Scotia over the last year or so, and also on really figuring out how we can make our program the best that it can be. In terms of additional perspective as a funder and the focus of our grant, so our focus is on Atlantic Canada. We have $1 million to distribute. I would love to know in the chat if anybody could identify themselves if you're from Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, or Newfoundland, Labrador. So that is really the focus of our grant.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lindsay. And I believe next we have François from Breakfast Club of Canada.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Asma, and everyone for the invitation. It's really appreciated. Thanks, Carolyn, for the introduction you've made also earlier and the leadership role you've been playing since the beginning of that process and kind of I don't know the right word in English, but you've definitely brought us together and, shared lots of information. So, and that's really important. So thanks for that. So my name is François. My role, I'm Director of Programs at the Breakfast Club of Canada. For those of you that don't know Breakfast Club of Canada, we're celebrating our 30th year this year. We're supporting breakfast programs from coast to coast to coast for like I said, over 30 years, supporting over the latest numbers is over 3,800 breakfast programs across the country, reaching more than 650,000 kids annually. It's a number that's evolving year over year, and as you can imagine, the needs are increasing year over year, especially in the past couple of years since the pandemic. For sure, the needs are greater than ever for school food and especially breakfast program. We were lucky to be the recipient of a $5 million grant as an initial recipient. We're covering most of the country with the exception of Atlantic and Maritime provinces. So like anything Quebec and west of Quebec till BC and the territories is okay for us, but Atlantic and Maritime is off limits to BCC because there's really relevant partners that have been identified as initial recipients there, as Lindsay was explaining before. Our application process is almost started more than a month ago, so we're towards the end of the application process. The end date is actually the April 21st. I'm going to put in the chat some information pertaining to the application process, the links to if you want to see the eligibility criteria, which were mainly described by Carolyn before, and also the link to our application form, and also the contact info and the name of the person in the programs department should you have any questions. So once I'm done talking, I'll just post that information there. We have no specific, we have our focus for the grants is general. We don't have a specific, so it can be equipment, it could be infrastructure, like it could be trucks, it could be warehouse infrastructure. We've had many requests so far. Some of it for equipment too. So community organizations wanting to, buy fridges or that sort of equipment and retain ownership and install those in schools is something also that's possible, but it's detailed in the eligibility criteria we've received. So we have quite a general focus and no minimum or maximum amount for application. So if an organization wants to buy two trucks, two sprinters, and it's like $250,000, that's fine. Some organizations have needs for gardening equipment, that sort of stuff. We're trying to hit as wide as possible. That's pretty much it. I don't know if there were any questions or we want to tackle those towards the end.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thank you so much, François, for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, we're going to be going into our panel questions shortly. I just wanted everybody to kind of get a little bit about the organizations that are joining us here today, including Breakfast Club of Canada. And so I know, Carolyn, we've already had the pleasure. So thank you, François. And next we have Carolyn, who is joining us from Farm to Cafeteria.
Thanks, Asma. Yes, now I'll put on my Farm to Cafeteria Canada hat and ask you to go to the next slide, Asma. I just shared a couple about our organization. So Farm to Cafeteria Canada is a charitable organization that works to transform how food is experienced, learned, and celebrated in all schools across Canada. And we achieve our mission by growing the capacity of school communities, connecting partners, providing grants and knowledge exchange supports, and informing policy. And so since 2016, we've given more than 300 grants in the range of about 500 to 50,000 to different school communities to help them increase access to food that's healthy, culturally appropriate, and as local as possible. Last year, we initiated our Nourishing Indigenous Foods and Foodways in Schools initiative. And part of this work, we've just launched a dedicated grant stream for Indigenous school communities, and we're creating a kindergarten to 12 learning journey for educators and others working in schools to learn to decolonize their school food systems. That won't be out immediately, but hopefully within the next year or so. I think next slide, please. So as a funder of the School Food Infrastructure Fund, we have 1.1 million to distribute. And we have a focus on, well, first, it's Canada-wide, our offering, and we're inviting grant applications that have a specific focus on serving more local and seasonal food in schools, and also that demonstrate a clear commitment to supporting Indigenous and Black food sovereignty. And so we ask about those questions in our application process, and our end date for applications is May 2nd. I think we opened up, I forget when we opened up, but it's about a 6-week window, I think, that we have, maybe 5 or 6 weeks. So May 2nd. Thanks, Asma. That's it for me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for that great introduction, and also for introducing Farm to Cafeteria. Next we have Robbie and Grant, who are joining us from MAZON. Welcome.
I thought we'd gone rogue by getting on the same screen, but it seems like you guys were prepared with this slide with both of us together. My name is Grant. I'm MAZON's co-executive director.
I'm Robbie. I'm the partnerships lead. And yeah, MAZON is we're also operating nationwide, both generally and with this with the School Food Infrastructure Fund. We are a funder. That's what we do. So we're a community foundation that funds several food security projects across the country for the last several decades. And yeah, we're funded by the Jewish community, and our grants and our operations reach everyone indiscriminately of that funding. And yeah, so we are really excited to be working to distribute school food infrastructure grants. I mean, echoing a lot of the same things that have already been shared, and we'll share more in the panel discussion coming up. But yeah, generally our grants are up to $200,000, and there's no minimum amount. So we're open also to, anything from a $500 thing to a $200,000 project. And we're also like the full spectrum of the eligible costs. We're open to funding, and excited to fund as well. And we'll share more in the rest of the webinar today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robbie and Grant. I really appreciate it. Great introduction. And finally, we have, last but not least, we have Fiona, who's joining us from Second Harvest.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for including me today. I appreciate it. And Carolyn, I just wanted to thank you too for the great introduction about SFIF. And again, as Francois said, she's been kind of getting us together, and it's been very helpful. So I'm currently the grants coordinator for Second Harvest. I have worked in school food for 20 plus years directly with student nutrition programs. The lead on our team was not available today, Kira, but she'll be happy to listen to the recording and everything about all of this. So for those of you that don't know Second Harvest, we're Canada's largest food rescue organization. And we do, although our head office is in Toronto, we do work across the country in all provinces and territories. In 2024, we were able to rescue over 87 million pounds of food from going to landfill. And they go to all different types of agencies that are supporting their communities, and that includes schools. Our grant process opened on April the 2nd, and it closes April 30th, so about a month. And then with funding decisions will be known by early June. I'm just checking here. Our focus, again, is general, as the other says. So infrastructure, vehicles, anything. And we don't have any limit to the request. So there's no minimum or maximum that you can apply for. And I just wanted to say ahead of time, I'm going to have to jump off a little bit early from the end of this. So I will put the contact information. We do have a grants administrator email that if you have any questions whatsoever, you can feel free to write in and let us know. But I'll put in the chat when I have to pop off.
Amazing. Thank you so much for a fantastic introduction. Really glad to have you here and thank you for being here. But yeah, thank you again. I want to say to all our panelists, I'm going to call you panelists because that's what we're doing, for being here today and for the incredible work that you do with your organizations and yourself. We're now going to be moving into our panel style question and answer, the Q&A session. And we'll ask each of you a few questions about your funding opportunities with a specific focus on Black-led organizations. And then we can start with a few questions that we've prepared, and then we'll open it up to any questions that are submitted. So we'll have that networking, as I mentioned, like open Q&A session afterwards, where organizations can ask the organizations who are, it's so confusing, but the organizations who are joining us here can ask the initial funders who are our speakers. Fantastic. So we can go ahead and start with the first question. What makes your grant application unique? Or distinct from others? And are there any particular values, goals, or approaches that set your process apart? And anyone can answer, there's no specific order. Awesome. Yes, Grant? Go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, I don't know. I think for most initial recipients, the eligibility criteria are the same. They are common. Some of us have different focuses, as we've expressed before, and we'd be more inclined in funding this or that type of project. And everyone kind of talk about that, but for the rest, I think we're pretty much bound by the same eligibility criteria.
Okay, fantastic. Yep, thank you. I think this question might be better worded by asking like the criteria and if there is anything particularly different in terms of what you're submitting with your application. But yes, sorry, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I can echo what was shared, and also say that, which is to say that I think a lot of across a lot of the applications, there's similarities of looking for, like good connections between schools and nonprofits. Like we're looking for programs that are going to increase the amount of food served in schools and maybe the quality, nutritional quality, or cultural relevance. And those might vary exactly what frameworks and values we're using, but MAZON is in that camp is valuing all those things as well. Something we are like prioritizing. I'll name, and others again, the other organizations might find that they're snapping right along with it, is that in addition to valuing the school, like prioritizing the impact within the school. So, again, the quantity and the quality of the food served, and how many students are reached. We're also like putting a big emphasis in our application on community food insecurity. So meaning how the programs impact families, the wider community, and the food systems around the school food programming, as well as another, like building deeper partnerships between community institutions that surround the school food program and strengthening those, as well as another bit excuse me, that makes our application a little bit unique is this question of refundable taxes that MAZON is, we know it's difficult to, I think all the organizations here are very aware of how the difficulty of floating, for example, when you go to spend and purchase a fridge, for example, even if you know or you suspect you will get a certain portion of those taxes refunded because of when you file at the end of the year. We're working to try to get as many organizations as possible that apply that can't float that funding, that need that funding at the moment of receiving a grant, that even refundable taxes will be covered for, we hope, the majority of recipients of a MAZON Canada School Food Infrastructure Grant, which is also something that I believe sets that process a little bit apart.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was actually very informative. I really appreciate it. Um, I just wanted to, I think we might want to go into the second question, or unless Carolyn, you would like to add.
Yeah, to the first question. So as I shared, Farm to Cafeteria Canada has a focus on local and seasonal foods, as well as a focus on Black food sovereignty and Indigenous food sovereignty. So we've had a longstanding focus on supporting schools to bring more local seasonal foods, whether it's from farms, shores, forests, gardens, other areas of the land, to support local food systems. And so we'd really encourage that in grant applications. And we know that there are significant needs and also really creative opportunities for Black communities and Indigenous communities to support local food systems and foodways and build these up to support greater food sovereignty. And so that can look like supporting Black or Indigenous-led growers or harvesters, processing work, supporting those who are making sure the food that they serve is culturally relevant for Black or Indigenous children and youth. And so that's just one of the elements that, yeah, we'll be really looking with applications.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carolyn. That was fantastic. And I do think there was a question that actually did come up in terms of like the funding criteria. So, sorry, I'm not sure why my chat is jumping around. But the question was, are there any are fun educational activities with primary and secondary schools, such as gardening and cooking workshops, accepted by these funds?
So sorry. Gardening for the most part, so long as it meets the requirements of the funder vis-a-vis producing like sufficient quantities of food and or food that meets a specific sort of like culturally specific niche that's prioritized within the framework of the grant should be eligible. The classes, though, any sort of garden programming, which would likely involve paying for staffing as well, would be outside the scope of this SFIF framework.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And just to echo that, what was shared at the beginning, which is that I think Carolyn, you mentioned that every dollar this needs to go towards the purchase and in some cases the installation, but like it's really centered around equipment and infrastructure. So if the the classes, for example, required specific equipment, that this could be a grant that looks at funding shovels or whatever kind of equipment you might be thinking of with regards to the classes, but unfortunately, as Grant said, can't fund the the totality of those workshops, assuming that staffing costs were involved.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I think that's something that we kind of are just kind of clarifying like the criteria around that is really important. And I think we have another question that is tying into this. So when do you do the grant applications, this is coming from Michael, sorry. Do the grant applications require one to put forward an embedded mixed method, so quantitative and qualitative evaluation processes for each initiative? Like how many students will be reached, how many local programs are helped by the specific initiative, new relationships that were made in the, so is that supposed to be included in the application?
I can speak to that one. So there are certain things, both qualitative and quantitative, that we as initial funders will need to report back to AAFC. And so there are, so I can't speak to everybody else's application, but certainly for the Atlantic Fund, we want to make sure that you have a process in place to collect that information. You don't have to give us a lot of details sort of right up front in the application part of this, but as you carry out the project and report on it, we will need some mostly quantitative information, but some qualitative information as well, just because that's what's required of us by AAFC. Anybody else want to add to that?
Ours is the same for Second Harvest. We based a lot of the questions on our application as to what we're going to have to report back on.
Same here for BCC.
Same here as well, and I know, just to share, and I think a lot of us are thinking the same, which is we're working to, like, our reporting requirements. There are several questions that we do have to hit, and also that we're trying to keep the reporting requirements as low as possible, and that's really a big priority for us at MAZON Canada, and I believe for most, if not all of, but yes, and thumbs up for all the other funders on this call.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic set of questions from the organizations as well as from our speakers. I think it's maybe we can move on to the second question. Perfect. And so for the second question, is there anything that you would want potential applicants, especially those from Black-led organizations, to know about your application process and how to have a strong application? So this would include any tips, common pitfalls to avoid, areas that are commonly missed or should be highlighted.
I can start and I'll let others add. So I think the biggest thing, just in terms of like the questions that I've been getting so far, is related to the nonprofit's relationship with the school. And so making sure that there is, if you're planning to install equipment or infrastructure on school property, that you have a letter from the school or the school board or the district or whatever it may be that gives you permission to actually do the thing that you're proposing to do in your application form. But the other thing too, and this is not necessarily for all the initial funders, so I'll let them speak for themselves. But we in Atlantic Canada, we're really trying to build capacity of organizations, particularly Black-led organizations and Indigenous organizations, to kind of get into the school food space. And so like we've gotten the question now, do you currently need to be providing food in a school? Like, do you currently need to be already part of a school food program? And in our case, in Atlantic Canada, that answer is no. It could be a relationship and a program that is currently emerging, but it would need to be completed. The installation or and purchase and installation of the equipment has to happen by the end of March 2026. So you have to be so far along in that process, but you don't have to physically be like this school year delivering a school food program. It could be something that you're planning for next year, for example.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of the times people are also wondering about the the nature of the relationship in terms of like how official or unofficial the relationship with the school is. Because some like organizations like work on, I don't know, like a request basis, like regularly, but like on a request basis. So schools are coming to them and they're just working with them, but there's no like official paperwork confirming they're like in partnership of some kind. So I was just wondering like what level of that is involved. Like,
yeah, just to, again, from our perspective for the Atlantic Fund, it's really about having a letter of permission for the equipment or the infrastructure. So there doesn't need to be like a formal like memorandum of understanding or anything like that between the two organizations for the program necessarily. For our purposes, it's really just about the equipment and the infrastructure. And I don't know if that's likely the same, but I'm not sure for all the other funders.
Same for us.
Yeah, same here, Joe.
Fantastic. I think that puts a lot of minds at ease. And I'm not sure if anyone else had anything to add to, any of our speakers have anything to add to question 2 or fantastic. Carolyn, did I see something? Oh, perfect. Okay. So we can move on to, I think, question
yeah,
3.
No, I think
Sorry.
some of us we're
Right.
just trying to figure out who's going to go. You
No.
guys
Oh,
keep
okay.
Carolyn, you go ahead.
Yeah, you first, Carolyn.
Oh, thank you. All right. One of the things is I suspect there are many small organizations on the call today. And so if that's you, I would suggest just thinking about what assets you already have and what you're building on. So what are your relationships? What have you seen success at? What is your approach and commitment? And then be really clear in your application, building on what Lindsay said. You know, it'd be great to be really clear about your capacity to roll this out. So how are you going to get from where you are if you're not serving food in the schools? You know, how are you going to take the steps to solidify those relationships and do your infrastructure purchases and then actually see results by you know, the end of this grant term? And so be great to kind of, how do you build on those existing partnerships or infrastructure or equipment or activities that you already have? It's just from a funder's perspective, we want to kind of see that line of how you're going to make it happen and a clear path on how you'll roll it out from the time you get the funding to when you'll be able to serve food in schools, or when it might not be you doing the service, but how your piece plays a role. And so what's especially important is that you can spend your funds, as Lindsay said, by March, the end of March 2026, and show those results. So it's just be as clear as you can about how that works. And again, if you don't have any pieces in place, just explain to us how you're going to make it work. Yeah, thanks.
I would like to add, I would like to add something quickly on the subject of tips or common pitfalls to avoid. Which I imagine this advice will be true not just from MAZON's application, but for any prospective SFIF initial recipient, any organization on the call here that you might be applying to. The eligibility requirements, like which parts of the project, which types of projects are eligible for funding and which expenses are restricted, it's a little bit convoluted. I can tell you that just for the SFIF recipients, just you know, those of us in the call here, like we've all spent hours looking over these things, finding little gaps, little areas where, you know, you might expect an expense to be eligible and it isn't. You can install a fridge in a school, but you can't do any renovations that would permanently change the space. You can buy a delivery vehicle, but not a food truck. I would really encourage you to read closely the eligibility requirements before spending significant time on an application that might, for reasons outside of our control, even if it would be a hugely impactful and incredible initiative for your school food program, that we might have to decline out of hand just based on these restrictions that the government has required we put in place. But if you're confused, genuinely, my biggest piece of advice is get in touch. Just give us a call. If you're unsure, I suspect that any one of us here on the call today, funders, would be like delighted to just like sit and talk with you and work this out and help you navigate this thicket of confusing requirements and restrictions.
Great, and I just want to add a couple other pieces of advice. One is, you know, choose the size of grant that's actually right for you. Like we have a maximum of $200,000 of what you can apply for. If that's what's right for the project you're envisioning, we really encourage you to go for it. And if you're an organization who knows your capacity right now is probably something in a financially smaller scope, $15,000, go for that. But we're not looking for you to downplay. Like we're excited about big ambitious projects as much as we are about financially small ambitious projects. So just like find what's right. If for some reason we can't fund the whole thing, we will just like, we might give you a ring and maybe we'll do some partial funding model, but we really do want to see the size of application that you want, so we can understand your vision best. I think another piece of advice would be like when you're thinking about in your as you apply, when you're thinking about what to apply for, you might think of it as a single piece of equipment, like, you know, a fridge is something that we've heard mentioned a few times today, but you can also think of it as a broader scope of like a fridge combined with delivery vehicle. Like you can see the whole project that you're trying to envision, and that it doesn't have to be just a single or even a collection of pieces of equipment as how you apply, as how you envision it, but you can also frame it in your application in terms of the project that you're proposing to take on here with the funding. And that'll all be clear as you fill out the application. I think like other advice piece is like feasibility. I mean, you're hearing it from a few of us today also is, you know, seeing that there is, for example, a relationship with the school or a clear path to a relationship with the school. But something we want to see is just that you're thinking about your capacity and why this project is a good fit for the capacity of your organization or your network. And I also want to say, like, just generally something really important to us here is that we're really not fussy about grammar, format, word counts. Like those aren't things that, I mean, we will have suggested amount of word counts, but we're not gonna, there's no like hard restriction where you won't be able to write any further. But we really like a priority for us is being flexible in what form your writing takes. We want to see what you write, not how you write. And I also want to say, like, something that we've seen increasingly in the last years with applications is the use of chatbots like ChatGPT, AI to write applications, and that's totally okay if that's something that helps you. Please use the tools at your disposal, and also make sure you're, you know, then reading that and editing that, because, you know, sometimes the way that those chatbots can put out information can be in a way that's not actually relevant to the question or not specific enough to your organization, and is just more broadly, here's why food security is important or school food is important, and we want to hear about like your work in your project. Yeah, those are some of the pieces of advice I would share. And maybe something else lastly is that we actually at MAZON haven't opened yet. So we're going to be opening in the next couple of weeks. So that's just something, and we'll be, so we have a later sort of application window than other applicants, if that you know, helps or hurts your ability to submit. Just a relevant piece of information on our end.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think we, just for purposes of time, we might go to our next question, question number 3. I just want to remind everyone that for those of you who are joining us a little bit later, that we will have a Q&A session shortly after our panel questions are answered. So please feel free to just type out your questions in the chat, or you know, feel free to, like, if you would like to ask them or voice them, please feel free to like hold on until a little bit later. So for our third question, I just wanted to ask, like, what is the primary focus of your grant when it comes to supporting Black-led organizations, and how does your organization ensure that funding is accessible and responsive to the needs of these groups? Oh, sorry, I did also want to acknowledge, and I do see your hand. I was just wondering, would it be possible to ask the question during Q&A? Is there something that was regarding the second question?
Am I being heard?
Yes, I can hear you.
What I wanted to ask about the idea about the infrastructure fund for Black children, and if the infrastructure fund was the priority for the Black community or for the school food program, because the state of food insecurity for Black children, I think that's the overarching situation. That is the big problem. And
Yeah.
we were in touch with the federal government Ministry of Agriculture in relation to the state of food insecurity for Black children. So, and hearing these conversations and the folks who asking the Black community what they need, and prioritizing it, I just wanted to know, you know, if this is the best thing to do, because like in the Indigenous community, they have a separate track for school food programs. And looking at the state of food insecurity in the Black community, a separate track might be needed, because we live in a multicultural society where school food programs would be at schools. For instance, in Jane of Finch in Toronto is a very multicultural society, community. But the state of food insecurity for Black children in relation to other groups is very startling. So programming and infrastructure fund and resources for Black children would have a separate way, a different way of looking at how we really look at the state of food insecurity as 46.3% of Black children in Canada. So when I hear the questions and the determining factors of getting this funding in supporting Black-led organizations, I don't know if infrastructure funds would be the right initial focus of the Black community in looking at how we alleviate food insecurity for Black children.
Yeah.
I just wanted to put that out generally, because the infrastructure fund might be a good thing for the School Food Coalition, but it might not be a priority for the Black community. So I just want to put that out of how we, because I think the overarching goal is to alleviate food insecurity for Black children.
Yeah. And so, thank you. And I really do appreciate you for sharing that. I was just going to say, I think this is a great addition to question number 3, right? Where we're asking, like, because again, school food is specifically majority like provincial or territorial jurisdiction. These are federal funds. And so that's kind of why we're asking specifically Black-led organizations and the roles that they can play in supporting the food security of children in school, right? And so I think this might be I'm glad. Thank you so much. I do appreciate you for adding context. I think this might help our speakers. Thank you. Awesome. Anyone like to speak to that?
I really appreciate the question, and I think it's a an excellent point. I also can answer the question 3 as it's written, but I just want to acknowledge, like, I think it's really important, for a lot of us as well, I'll just speak for us at MAZON, but I think for us, we are really happy and grateful to be supporting school food and infrastructure across Canada, and I think that's, like, it's really needed. There's, like, a lot of infrastructure and equipment needs in school food programming across like it's a really needed situation. And also I think there's it's a great point. This is not, is this the top priority? I think, and like what other priorities are needed and that are desperately needed, that maybe some of them are happening in other funding, because there are other funding options being opened up by the government and I guess privately and foundation levels, and also there's a lot that's not happening. And I think, like, I don't know exactly where the conversation goes, and I don't know that this is necessarily, I mean, we can see the space where we want to have the conversation, but I think we absolutely need to be thinking about, like, what's not being funded and what's not being prioritized. And I think a lot of the folks on this call, again, just naming us at MAZON, at least just speaking for ourselves, that we're really here to have those conversations and raise them with the government as relevant as well. And I can also just directly answer. I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that piece, but also happy to just move on to answering the question 3.
Awesome, thank you. I'm not sure if anybody. Oh, Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I can just echo Robbie's points and just say that a lot more is needed in terms of policy, programming, funding, and many efforts to make sure that the rates of, food insecurity, to change all of those statistics and realities for Black children and families. Within the box that we have right now, the School Food Infrastructure Fund, it can support a tiny piece of that. And so just appreciate you acknowledging that much bigger piece that we're working within.
Absolutely, yeah. And
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that in direct answer to the question, what's the primary focus of the grant? Farm to Cafeteria Canada has placed an emphasis on Black food sovereignty and Indigenous food sovereignty, and we will take that as a priority when looking at applications.
Fantastic. Yeah. I think in terms of, I just want to give everyone, because I am seeing a lot of questions coming up in the chat, so I do want to give everyone an opportunity to ask their questions. And so for time, I will move on to our second last question, which says, looking ahead, what kind of impact do you hope to see through this funding, specifically within Black-led community organizations, and what change are you aiming to support or spark? Also, I was just gonna, go ahead, Carolyn. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I think one hope is to just spark ideas and projects, give funding to work that hasn't been able to receive funding before. I think Lindsay spoke to, the kind of support to incubate, or not incubate, to like just support some really great work that's not been able to take root yet, and a lot of people have dreams and visions and just haven't been able to receive funding. And so it's how can we all provide some support to organizations and individuals who want to be in this space to support more initiatives that are gonna really support children and youth, Black children and families, and yeah, so a hope is to see different initiatives from what have been able to happen before, and just grow some of the ideas that people have really been wanting to put forward for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Carolyn. And I'm sorry if this was not clear for those of you who are joining us a bit later, but I think specifically for this information session, so school food initiative fund, specifically why we're hosting this is that there are a lot of Black-led communities who are already working with schools. Schools, as we understand, are multi-ethnic, especially in a place like Toronto. There's not a single specific school that just has Black children. So we do understand, definitely, and this is more so, again, as I mentioned, open to everyone to join us. I just wanted to give Black-led organizations who are already doing the work the opportunity to hear about these types of grants that are available to support their ongoing efforts to connect with their local schools and work with their local schools. And so I'm hoping that kind of clarifies a little bit more the purpose of what we're doing here today. And sorry, if anybody else would like to speak to this question, that'd be really great. Fantastic. Okay. And I think in that case, we can move on to our last question. So for our last questions, this is a question that's been coming up quite a lot. So a lot of organizations collaborate. Let's say one of them is, a local food grower or has access to local food growers. And then the other one is like more so like the, parents and children, and that's like how they kind of come together. So a lot of organizations are asking, can you submit a form in collaboration with several organizations? And how would that work, especially for submitting applications to multiple initial recipients? So let's say we apply to MAZON and you're also applying to Breakfast Club of Canada, but you're also applying to Second Harvest. So imagine you're applying to all of them, but you're applying as like in collaboration with another organization. How would that work out?
Can jump in from what I asked the government specifically about that question, and so I can share what they responded. And so the idea is that the organization, one thought is that one organization might sign the agreement with one of us funders, but then they would need to maintain ownership of the equipment for at least 2 years. So ownership of equipment is not allowed to be transferred, or even the funding, like one organization can't get the money and then give the money to another organization to buy the equipment. But a fund or one of us can decide to have multiple organizations written into our agreements. And so I think it could be a little bit flexible in that sense, where either one organization could kind of apply to be the host or the facilitator for it all, and have the ownership and all the pieces there and agreements and reporting requirements, or it could be with multiple organizations kind of in that same contract. And then if it was multiple ones as signatory in a contract, each one of those could maintain ownership of the equipment. And then each of the organizations would need to report independently. I think that's the details. Would anyone else like to add?
No, I find it a bit,
François.
I find it a bit complex. Let's say you take the example of a truck, like you couldn't have, I mean, theoretically, it's possible to have a truck co-owned by 8 organizations, but how would you make that work, especially in light of what's being asked of us, where they need to retain ownership? So theoretically, I think it's possible, but I don't know how we could make that work. And I don't want to put unnecessary constraints in applications, but I just can't see how we could make it work.
Yeah, I can share on our end, like we encourage partnerships and collaborations as part of your work with this grant. And also that, you know, yeah, at the point of applying, we do want to see that there's one organization who's going to sort of own the grant, and who's like, we want to see the name who, let's say we're writing a check, we're going to put one organization's name on a check ultimately, if there's, when you at the point of receiving the funds, and that organization, as Carolyn said, is going to be does have to be the one that spends the funds. But that being said, we like, if what you're thinking about is as an organization right now is who can we collaborate, which organizations are in our network, that's amazing. Like for as far as we're concerned, we want to see that. From a legal perspective, I think it's a bit different, like a legal and contractual perspective. There's on that level, I think it will look a little bit like we can, there's still flexibility. Like Carolyn said, we can have an agreement with multiple, at the end of the day, if there's signatures, we can have multiple signatures on it. But in terms of who is at the point of applying, there's a bit more rigidity. But in terms of how you're thinking about and designing and implementing these improvements or new initiatives in school food infrastructure, we are excited about partnerships and collaboration.
And I would also add, like as with the gray areas around like which specific items are eligible for funding, if you're confused, if you're into territory where you're you know, there don't seem to be structures that are explicitly built for the request that you're trying to make, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll support you through it.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Thanks, Robbie, for making it more precise. I think we're, you know, the distinction between the legal, you know, aspect of the document, and then of course BCC has always encouraged people working in collaboration and organization working in collaboration, so that makes total sense. Thanks for the clarification.
Amazing. Fantastic. I think that was our last question, and now we are ready to move on to our Q&A session. Thank you all for your incredible participation today. I see a lot of, questions in the chat. I would love for everyone to kind of unmute themselves and kind of verbalize their questions. And so we just wanted to move into the Q&A. I do, to get things started, I'll ask if anyone has a question, or if you've already put a question in the chat and you'd like to vocalize it. It'd be really great if you could unmute yourself, or jump right in if you're comfortable. Just opening up the floor to questions. I'm just gonna also look through the chat to see, because I missed quite a few. So I do think Magduda actually had a couple of questions. Magduda, are you able to ask? Because I think you had 2 questions. And it'd be great. Let's see. Trying to pull the question up here. So Oh yes, so the first question I think that Magduda had was asking about if oh my goodness, my thing keeps moving. Okay. Okay, so it says the subsidy from the fund finance agricultural production intended for neighborhood food banks, and are the students more and the students more for learning and tasting. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but yeah. So does the subsidy from the fund finance agricultural production intended for neighborhood food banks and the students more so for learning and tasting? The question was in French, I'm sorry.
I see a couple of folks unmuted, so if others want to jump in, please. But I can answer this, which is to say, in terms of so like going to a neighborhood food bank or something of the sort, basically like the equipment or infrastructure that's purchased with this grant can be used for MAZON at least. We aren't saying the only thing it has to, let's say it's a delivery van, that it only has to deliver food to school. If I understand the question correctly, it's can the, and maybe I'm not. I'll address the different things that might come up with it. A neighborhood food bank is a great possible candidate organization for receiving these funds if they partner with the school food program. And as far as we're concerned, as long as the primary objective and intention is to use it for the school food programming for eating foods in the school, it can be used in other capacities if that is needed and comes up. Again, primary objective means for school food programming. The second part of the question being about primary focus being like tasting, learning, like maybe more cultural aspects of the project. I think for us, we have a list of sort of school-based priorities and community-based priorities when you at the point of applying that will be clear to you in the application process. And I think as long as it's meeting those priorities, some of which are, you know, strengthening food culture and food systems and things of that sort. I think like you sort of just need to look at those priorities and see, does it align generally? And I think, you know, we do want to see that it's strengthening food programming in the schools, also in terms of quantity, also in terms of like the amount provided is a priority for us. And also if it's doing those, if for example, increasing like, you know, if there is a cultural, agricultural element to it, that's also in the priorities. Again, I think for us at least, it'll just become clear whether it's a relevant application at the point of applying for the grant.
Yeah. So I just read the question in French. Yeah, the way I interpret the question is, you know, it's an organization. Like I think the key element in your answer is does it contribute to a school food program, right? If it doesn't at the end, then it's not an eligible project to be financed. In this case, the way I interpret, at least the way it's written in French, it's the subsidy would finance, you know, agricultural production that would be destined to a food bank. But what we're missing is that food bank actually taking active part in a school food program. It's not clear in the question, but if the answer is the food bank is not actively involved in a school food program, then the food bank wouldn't be eligible for a grant.
Okay, fantastic.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I kind of understand. So more so the eligibility of like yeah, I think you answered that question perfectly. Thank you, Robbie and François. I appreciate it. Thank you, Carolyn, as well. Okay, I think we're gonna go into, okay, I'll have Anon. Is it possible for you to share your question and then I'll go back into the chat?
the infrastructure fund, would it support food production from a Black farm in collaboration with a Black food bank, Black community organization to initiate a breakfast program for children outside of the school and after school program, lunch program, dinner program for Black children in a particular community. I would say it would be a partnership with Black farming, Black food bank, Black community organization, and maybe the health center or city-run community center. Would it be possible to have that kind of collaboration and partnership?
Awesome. Thank you, Anna, for the question.
So that sounds like an incredible project that you're describing. I would say for the purposes of sort of SFIF eligibility, that the primary thing you have to consider is, and this is relevant to the previous question as well about this local food bank scenario, is whether the primary use of the infrastructure that's being purchased through the grant is to provide food in schools. It kind of all of these other partnerships that you're describing, provided that this partnership with a local food bank also fuels school food, or if that partnership with the local food bank is secondary to the primary utilization of the infrastructure, and the primary utilization of the infrastructure is this after-school program that you're describing, to supply that program with culturally appropriate, like high quality food. I would say in that instance, it would be eligible. In terms of the prioritization schemas being used by different organizations, whether food sovereignty is explicitly prioritized, I can't speak to what's happening behind the scenes at all of the initial recipients, but I will say, this just sounds like an incredible project, and really the thing you need to be thinking about primarily for it is this infrastructure primarily being used towards powering or supplying food in schools, and if yes, then it's at least eligible within the SFIF framework.
When you say infrastructure primarily for providing food for schools, what does that mean? The question's for Grant. You just spoke of space being primarily for school food programs. What do you mean by that? Could you elaborate more on that particular comment?
Yeah. So the farm equipment. Oh, sorry about the echo.
No.
The farm equipment, if it's being primarily used for, of course, you're buying farm equipment, you're not just using it to supply a school with food, you're using it to just grow all year round. If you're providing farm equipment to like a commercial farm, and you're expecting that commercial farm is like one of the use cases for supplying that farm with this infrastructure, is that it will allow for increased food production and increased support for like a local after-school food program. That's amazing. But if most of the rest of the year this farm equipment is being used for other things, that might make it complicated, because the School Food Infrastructure Fund requires that the primary utilization, the primary use of this infrastructure is for school food. If most of the time this infrastructure is being used, the farm equipment is being used for things other than providing food in schools, then that makes for a harder case to make within the SFIF framework.
Well, if the project is intentionally specifically for food insecure children and families, the production method would definitely be 100% for that particular kind of program, because our community need intentional programs, focused programs. But I was referring to the infrastructure, not of the farm, but the place where food would be packed, and whether it be a fridge or a conveyor belt, but our kitchen resources to cook the food. So it was not necessarily about the farm from your comment I was referring to, but more of a place where, because it's a partnership with food production, community food bank, a Black-led community food bank, and a Black community organization, probably in partnership with a health center and a school food program, because there are few Black school programs specifically in Toronto. There's a primary school and there's a high school.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at intentionally targeting Black children, it's challenging for the Black community other than the Indigenous community. And these are the two communities with the most food insecure in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
With the Black community being 46.3%, nearly half of Black children living in food insecure households. So the intention of the Healthy Food Program is a good idea, but the challenges is not for like BIPOC communities, because the challenges of food insecurity in the Black community is very much more. So the infrastructure, like this, what I'm speaking of, 100% can be towards making sure this resources is for Black children of school age.
Awesome. Thank you, and I'm so sorry. I just wanted to say, I think if it's okay, I really do appreciate definitely the perspective that you do bring. And it's important that it's important that this you know, that you proceed with, of course, your programming. It's to get, I think, the school infrastructure fund all together. I think that would definitely require the involvement of some school. Which schools you choose is, I do believe, up to you. But as long as it's in partnership with the school, I think it should be okay. And I think different organizations have different restrictions on like how the infrastructure is used. I hope that helps. We do have 2 more questions in the chat. I just wanted to share. So the first one is from Michael. And he said that the question does tie into the first few general questions that we had. And given the capital costs for equipment can get quite high, has there all been a specific focus on enhancing collaborative partnerships within certain areas to create a community hub, even specific school in a neighborhood that would have more realistic capacity for food provision, to stretch both the dollar and the reach of the food provision to multiple schools rather than just each school? So just kind of partnership within schools and working with schools that actually may have already the infrastructure, and maybe enhancing that infrastructure is what I'm getting from this question, Michael. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That was good, thank you. But I also wanted to ask the panel speakers if they have observed any new partnerships being formed yet organically, or is there still a siloed-like approach? I mean, I know this is all very new, so I'm not sure if any of this has become evident yet, but it might over the next year. But I'm just wondering, because in terms of, I remember earlier one of the questions was like, has there been any focus on creating new partnerships and collaborations? So I'm just wondering if that's been observed at all. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I'm not sure if our speakers were able to catch that. Was it a little difficult to hear? Okay, so I think it's just asking about the capital cost of equipment, and so quite literally the physical infrastructure, and enhancing collaborative partnerships with other schools and other communities to kind of collaborate with this. So it might go back to our collaborative question number 5 a little bit. I hope that helps.
I mean, I can just speak up to say the more collaboration and the more kind of hub idea to be able to centralize and then reach as many schools as possible sounds ideal. And so it is a question, you know, for folks applying of how to leverage those partnerships and different pieces down the chain to just, yeah, be able to have the most impact and most efficiencies of scale and all those things to really reach as many children and youth as possible. I think that's all I can say of, I think most of us are going to be, all of us funders probably are going to be really excited the more collaborations and coordination that can be achieved. Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Carolyn. And I think Zakiah, sorry, I do see that your hand is up. Last question, I believe, before I head off.
Hi, thank you to all the presenters that came on this call and for everybody who came in and joined this conversation. I was just wondering, is there consideration taken for, like I've seen that the parameters is the project needs to happen within a year. Is there consideration for how the resources purchased would be used past a year? Is that something that we should consider putting into the project? Like how would it be able to sustain moving forward, or how would the impact it would have after that 1 year period?
I was going to say great questions, Zakiah. Thank you so much for that. Speakers?
I'm not sure I understood the question properly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think what Zakiah was asking was kind of planning for beyond that year. So once you purchase your equipment, making sure that you're able to use it and that continuation of usage, and indicating that in the application, like how would that necessarily like work?
That's a good question. I think Carolyn had mentioned, what's the 2-year rule around it? So the applicant, the ultimate recipient organization needs to retain ownership for 2 years and use the equipment or infrastructure for 2 years. But in terms of that's the only rule that we know of in terms of
So if I could just give a quick example. So for example, like if we applied and said we wanted a refrigerated truck to deliver meals from a production site to a school, would it add value to our application to speak of that continuing past the 2 years, or should we only focus in the application saying that, you know, within this 2 year time, we're going to do that? Because I'm just kind of thinking, you know, obviously the van would still exist past the 2 years. Would it matter to you guys as an applicant if we're able to continue to use it for that purpose past the 2 years, or should we not bother say anything like that in the application?
It's a great question. I think,
you know, from my perspective, it's relevant information to be mentioned in the application, because we're in this, and I don't want to put words in the federal government's mouth, but I think we're in this for the long run. So we would want any new initiative or reinforced initiative to last as long as possible in the school food ecosystem. But that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if there's a different opinion. Yeah.
I can echo that and say we have a question about it in our application where we specifically ask about like beyond sort of the immediate term. So there will be like a specific opportunity to mention that in MAZONs, but it may vary across the different applications.
Yeah, same for us. We have to ask about the medium to longer term impact of that, and that's where you can elaborate. And yeah, it is certainly seen. We would love to know that this will be used well past the 2 year mark and make a difference to your organization and the children, youth, and folks.
Amazing. So I do believe that was our last question. I'm not sure if speakers, any last suggestions before we head off? Okay, fantastic. So I just wanted to say thank you all so much for your time and engagement today. It's been a privilege to hear from the amazing panelists and to learn more about funding opportunities to support Black-led organizations and working in school foods. And so your insights have been really invaluable, and we're deeply grateful for your contributions and to this important conversation. As we wrap up, we just want to take a moment to reflect on some of the key points that came across today. So, of course, empowerment through information. which is one of the reasons why we are holding this space. And the importance, of course, of representation in the school food movement. I know that a lot of Black organizations already have ties to schools, and multi-ethnic schools, mind you. And so it's really important that they hear about these opportunities to continue the work that they are doing, but have that financial support and security to continue that work. And collaboration and action, of course, towards food sovereignty and justice as we move forward. But before we sign off, I want to remind everyone that the journey doesn't stop here. If you have any questions or would like to explore some of the resources mentioned here today, please feel free to reach out to the Black School Food Working Group, and my email, I do believe, is on the last slide. That's my university email. I respond a lot faster. I don't know what it is, but the anxiety of school keeps me on my toes. And I just wanted to say, and any of our partner organizations, of course, will provide the information for that. We'll also be providing the recording, and we're committed to, of course, staying connected and supporting each other through this work. On behalf of the Black School Food Working Group, I wanted to thank each of you for participating and for being a part of this movement. And we look forward to continuing these conversations and advancing Black food sovereignty together in the capacity of school foods and beyond. Please do not hesitate to follow up if you have any additional questions. And I'm hoping that you have a wonderful rest of your day. I just want to, again, thank our lovely speakers today. I'm really happy they answered a lot of the hard-hitting questions, a lot of the questions that make people hesitant not to, apply. And so I really do appreciate you for taking the time, and it's meaningful conversation today. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my God. And I want to thank our French interpretation team. I really do appreciate it. All your hard work today. It's really wonderful to be able to have that available to people. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone.